Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today we are talking about the internet itself. How specifically the internet will actually survive a war. Now, if you don't know what's going on in the world, you must be living in a cave, and odds are you're not listening or watching this. But obviously, we have seen hotspots around the globe for decades at this point, the biggest ones at the moment being Russia, Ukraine, as well as Israel, Hamas, uprisings throughout Africa. Niger just went through a coup, like these kinds of things. But overarchingly, the internet has essentially survived it all. But can it really fully? That's what we're going to be talking about, because NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, is actually starting to address this for obvious reasons, and here's what's going on. Now, there's a good write-up, a concise write-up on Bloomberg reporting by basically Rob Thurbrand of TechSpot, who was cribbing from them, and I'm cribbing from him. Also read the Bloomberg report as well. Very interesting stuff. But essentially, this is the backdrop of all of the tension that we've got geopolitically. And so by virtue of that, we're worried that Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, et cetera, could target the actual subsea cables that basically connect the world together on the internet during a military crisis. In other words, where they just simply start cutting the cables to cause absolute chaos for Europe, the Middle East, North America, wherever these cables are running. Now, this is not unprecedented for the record. If you didn't know, the Houthi rebels in Yemen were actually suspected of damaging an underwater cable in the Red Sea. And that, for the record, that cable is responsible for 17% of global internet traffic. And they did this past February. That is a massive blow to internet connectivity. That's almost 1 in 5, websites visited, traffic moved that is going through that essential cable. These are critical to how we operate right now. And if you are watching this or listening to this and you are not sitting in North America, odds are, and it's being delivered to you by one of these undersea cables. Now, on top of this, Sweden said in October that damage to a Baltic subsea cable, basically linking Estonia to Sweden, was purposeful. They didn't go as far as blaming Russia, but pretty much everybody is. Now, Bloomberg reported also that researchers, including academics from US, Iceland, Sweden, and Switzerland, are looking at ways to develop essentially a method of seamlessly rerouting internet traffic from these subsea cables to satellite systems in the event of an attack or damage from natural disaster. And so one of these cables gets cut, we start moving that traffic via satellite, and we're going to talk about that. Now, Iep Kunte Turmus is an advisor and program manager for this NATO program and said the implementation of the project is due to begin very soon. However, researchers will spend about 2 years or so testing the prototypes and dealing with international regulations, because obviously that's going to be a whole mess of laws all over the place before essentially this working system can be created. In other words, we all have to get on the same legal page here, and that could be a very, very difficult thing because a lot of countries have different regulatory requirements than other countries. And so here we go. Obviously, this could be a very big issue. Now, some of them that are involved in this is the U.S. firm Viasat. Now, Viasat, if you recall, is the satellite infrastructure system that essentially was hacked on day one of part of Russia's invasion to Ukraine, because Viasat was offering services in the region. So they're naturally participating in this effort. Space tech company Sierra Space Corp and also an Icelandic cybersecurity company known as Syndis are involved also. Now, one part of this project is to examine the ways of detecting threats to undersea cables more effectively to determine when traffic needs to be rerouted. In other words, if something is getting degraded, like somebody's cutting through a cable, and for the record, this is not like a standard data cable in your house. These are thick cables. They're designed to withstand things like a shark trying to eat them, that kind of stuff. So while the cable network operators can detect disturbances on, a cable down, for example, to the nearest kilometer, the project wants to reduce this to the nearest meter. So you can literally see where the, Russian scuba divers went and cut the cable, that kind of thing. So NATO says that almost all of the organization's internet traffic travels through undersea cables. And if you are looking at all of the data around the world, the transactions alone that these undersea cables facilitate around the world are basically $10 trillion worth of financial transactions annually. So this is obviously a massive, massive thing. This has the potential to destroy economies potentially or shut them down temporarily. It's a huge, huge thing. Now, the other side of this coin is that because these are massive fiber optic cables that are, very hardened running underneath the sea, they have a massive amount of bandwidth. I often say when I'm on stage, if I had one of these cables, obviously with enough power and it was wrapped around the earth, I could send one packet of data through one of these cables 5 times in a second, assuming I had nothing stopping me, right? This is how fast these cables move. That's also the amount of bandwidth that these things have to allow, let's say, somebody in Australia to seamlessly stream this live. And obviously, part of that is going to be YouTube's job to replicate it if you're watching the video side of this from their North American data centers to the Australian data centers and vice versa. That's why it's, if I'm watching news from Sydney, it's pretty good. So by virtue of that, what we are talking about here is a satellite system that does not nearly have as much bandwidth or firepower, and also satellite has a lot more latency. If you recall, they're starting to improve that with low orbit satellites. That's what's SpaceX, not SpaceX. Is it SpaceX? The one, the Elon Musk Starlink. And so by virtue of that, that's what we're talking about here. But there's still latency. So that basically traveling that packet 5 times around the world in 1 second is not going to be the same with the satellite. Basically, data has to establish a connection to the satellite, which is going to take time, and the satellite has to establish connection to somewhere else, and it's just not going to be as fast and efficient no matter how good low orbit satellites are right now. They're not going to beat a fiber optic cable. So what does that mean? That means we have to improve satellite performance as well. That also means that because we are moving such a huge amount of bandwidth through these cables, that we may not have a satellite infrastructure capable enough in 2 years to do that, which then means traffic prioritization. And so if, let's say, those cables are cut and things get rerouted, maybe Netflix stops, but critical government services or critical, military communications are allowed to go through. And so while services are degraded, basically like streaming, for example, which takes up an enormous amount of bandwidth, critical functions can still go. These are the kinds of things that they're going to be talking about. It's fascinating, to see this come to fruition. I think it does need to happen. It needs to happen at a large scale because, quite frankly, it's going to be a lot harder to shoot satellites out of the sky than it is going to be simply to go and cut a cable. So we'll see what happens with this. I have hope for the future. With this, I think it's a good idea. Obviously, there are kinks to work out, as I just mentioned, but here we are. If the internet is going to survive a war, this is how we're going to do it. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please attempt to stay private. Thanks, everybody.